My name is Deborah. I'm with the Humanists Association of the Monterey Bay Area and sponsoring this talk along with the Monterey County Skeptics. And with me soon up here is Susan Garbeck, who represents the Monterey County Skeptics, and will be introducing our speaker. So, Susan?
All right.
All right.
Woo! I get excited. Okay, so my name is Susan Gerbic. I'm in charge of Monterey County Skeptics. We've been around about 7 years, I think, something like that. We're a social meetup group, and we investigate claims of the paranormal as more of our purview. And I'm glad to be talking to you today and giving you a little information about the Monterey County Skeptics. This is our first time we have joined together with the Humanist group, and I don't think it'll be our last. I think this will be something that we can maybe do speakers, maybe once a month or something like that. I think this is going to work out well. Our speaker today I met in the Skeptics Toolbox in Eugene, Oregon. That happens every year. It's an organization that is more of a workshop kind of thing where maybe 100 people show up each year for 4 days, and you get hands-on, more or less instruction on how to do better thought process, how to think through things and investigate claims and things like that. And for those of you out there who may not know what a skeptic is, it's kind of one of those words that's almost being taken over right now by climate change skeptics and so on. But skepticism is more of it's a method. It's not a conclusion. We may say we're skeptics, but I would have to say probably every one of you out here is also skeptic of some sort or another. Maybe, buying a car or, a claim that somebody's trying to sell you something. You may be a bit skeptical about what they're telling you. We may take it a little further, and we are more interested in the claims of the paranormal and so on. Monterey County Skeptics is a social group, and we are quite social. And but I am involved in quite a few activities, if you're interested in finding out, that are much more activist related. So I have that social side, and we have this. So the Skeptics Toolbox is held every year in Eugene, Oregon, and it's run by one of the founders of the modern scientific skepticism movement, Ray Hyman, and I met Richard there 2 years ago, and I was awarded the In the Trenches Award, which is the highest honor they have for people who are out doing things for skepticism and educating people. And last year, I wasn't able to attend, but Richard was the one recipient as well to the Toolbox. So we've only had maybe 4 or 5 people who've won the Toolbox Award, maybe 6 or 7 over the years, and so it's a high honor to be a winner of the Toolbox. So this is quite timely because Richard and myself have both been are in the latest Skeptical Inquirer magazine. This is the largest circulated magazine in the skeptic world. It's called Skeptical Inquirer magazine, and he's right here on the front. Dirty Bombs, What is a Danger Really? And he's getting his first look at the magazine. I just got it a couple days ago. So, and there's also a copy of this here in the library, and you'll be able to read. And it's really cool because several of the people I know are in here that I work with in the skeptic activism. So it's pretty exciting to read about the Brzezinski Clinic, and which has been a lot of fun. And here's Richard's article right here. What is the danger that terrorists will attack the United States with a nuclear or dirty bomb? So there's quite a bit. He's got several pages in here. And if you're interested in this, you can pick up a subscription to Skeptical Inquirer magazine, or you can borrow the one here at the library. So Richard has written this book, Who's Winning the War on Terror? And my book is a bit well-worn. I fly a lot. I am in, my boyfriend's in LA, so I fly a lot. So what Richard's going to be talking about today is quite very, very, I see it all the time. I mean, I just got back from LA last weekend. And it's a bit worn because I carry it with me, and I've been trying to read it a lot where I'm sitting so people can watch it. But most people have their eyes down at their phones, so I don't really get a lot of people having any comment. But it's a great book, and he has these for sale in the back. $10 cash, if you will see him, but the library's not supposed to know, so make sure you just come this way. okay? Because we can't be selling anything in here. So anyway, you'll find this a fascinating read, and you will find his talk fascinating. I saw something similar to this when I was at the Toolbox. He says this is a different lecture, and I find it very interesting that Richard has been driving around. He's from Montana. He drove down to San Diego to see family and back up to Portland, and he's been enjoying the scenery instead of flying around, which I would love to do, but I just don't have the time right now. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Richard to the podium. Yay.
Okay, time to have some fun. Susan, by the way, I'm also the head of the Flathead Area Secular Humanists Association in Montana. So I am the head atheist in Flathead County, Montana. So if you weren't impressed by the other stuff, please. Okay, today I'm going to talk about 5 myths about airport security. Orient here. Before we address the 5 myths, I'd like to discuss the more part by taking a brief look at how we came to be fighting an endless war on a tactic, terror, and how we came to be living in a surveillance state. The world changed on September 11, 2001. We've all heard that phrase many times. Questions that cliche brings to my mind are what exactly changed, what caused that change, and why, 12 years after 9/11, are the American people still so frightened of terrorism. What changed was the mindset of a majority of Americans who are now willing to accept on faith that the homeland is in constant danger of another major terrorist attack, and that no security measure is too expensive, too onerous, or too oppressive not to be employed to protect us. Another factor is the psychology of fear. People overestimate the risks of spectacular events, such as the 9/11 attacks, and worry less about more common risks, such as those inherent in driving an automobile. People have trouble estimating the risks of unfamiliar events, once again, such as terrorist attacks. People underestimate the risks they take voluntarily, and overestimate the risks of situations in which they have no control. Finally, people overestimate risks that are continuously under public scrutiny. A good rule of thumb: if it's in the news, don't worry about it. By definition, news is almost something that almost never happens. Okay, then we have probability neglect, or neglect of probability. This is a cognitive bias, not a logical fallacy, such as the base rate fallacy. In the case of the war on terror, no calculation of the probability of another terrorist attack is even being made by our leaders. Yet, they continue to make decisions about national security and surveillance that profoundly affect our lives. By the loosest possible definition of the word terrorism, 34 people have been killed in terrorist attacks in the United States since 9/11. That's 3 people per year killed by terrorists since 9/11. This is a major thesis of my book. The size of America's counterterrorism behemoth is not commensurate with the danger we're in. This is a little thing about probability neglect. Okay, a third component is exaggeration, and I'm not lying for political benefit. And here is an example.
The search for Osama bin Laden, there was constant discussion about him hiding out in caves, and I think many times the American people have a perception that it's a little hole dug out of the side of a mountain. Oh no, this is it. This is a fortress, a complex, multi-tiered, bedrooms and offices on the top, as you can see, secret exits on the side and on the bottom, cut deep to avoid thermal detection, a ventilation system to allow people to breathe and to carry on. The entrance is large enough to drive trucks and even tanks, even computer systems and telephone systems. It's a very sophisticated operation.
Oh, you bet. This is serious business. And there's not one of those. There are many of those.
And Rumsfeld continued, and they've been used very effectively. And I might add, Afghanistan is not the only country that has gone underground. Any number of other countries have gone underground. Coalition forces never found any such bunkers. We all know that. And this was only a small pile of the steaming heaps of baloney dished out by the Bush administration. For example, Rumsfeld spoke of over 5,000 deaths on 9/11, long after a death toll of 3,000 had been established. George W. Bush labeled Iraq, Iran, and North Korea an axis of evil, leaving the pundits who wonder what he possibly could have been talking about. Bush and company claimed that Al-Qaeda had sleeper cells, whatever that is, in 50 to 60 countries. In as late as 2004, Dick Cheney was still claiming that Saddam Hussein had ordered the 9/11 attacks, when those of us who had been paying attention knew otherwise. Unfortunately, I have to check the audience here, bullshit like this has a decades-long half-life. And the bunk didn't stop with the Bush administration. Here are just a few of the people who have picked up the ball. I cover many of these characters and issues in my book, so I'm not going into great detail here. But even this brief rundown should give you an idea of why Americans remain frightened of terrorism and how people in high places can say anything and get away with it. Trust me. Michael Chertoff, former head of the Department of Homeland Security and the head of the Chertoff Group, a lobbying firm that peddled 250 X-ray backscatter body scanners to the Transportation Security Administration. More about this later. Janet Napolitano succeeded Chertoff as DHS Secretary. In her testimony before Congress about her $60 billion DHS budget request for fiscal year 2014, she claimed that all 240,000 DHS employees risk their lives daily. Given that DHS employees regularly rank lowest on job satisfaction surveys of federal employees, I'm sure Janet felt in danger herself. A mainstay of her testimony before Congress has been the claim that terrorist methods are continuously evolving. More about this later. Transportation Security Administration head John Pistoli, he regularly regales us with stories about each new terrorism innovation and how each new layer of airport security will foil it. More about this later. General Keith B. Alexander, current head of the National Security Agency, and actually he was the head of the National Security Agency for 8 years, which is the longest reign of any NSA head. Supporters of the NSA have claimed that its metadata surveillance program has foiled 54 terrorist plots in the United States and abroad since 9/11. Thankfully, some people check this stuff. Senators Patrick Leahy of Vermont, Mark Udall of Colorado, Ron Wyden of Oregon, ProPublica, the Washington Post, among many, many others, have debunked this claim. In fact, Washington Post reporter Ella Nakashima told me that this claim distilled down to one bona fide terrorism case. 2008 prosecution of an Islamic San Diego cab driver for donating $8,500 to the Somali terrorist group Al-Shabaab. Alexander will retire next month. President Obama has nominated Vice Admiral Michael S. Rogers as his successor. Your own Senator Dianne Feinstein, chair of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and erstwhile supporter of Alexander, the NSA, and those who supplied the NSA's material needs. Late last year, in defense of the NSA, Feinstein said that America is less safe than it was 2 years ago. Coincidentally, she receives 3 times the campaign contributions from Intel defense contractors than does Patrick Leahy. I don't have enough information yet to discuss Jay Johnson, however, the new DHS head. However, the fact that he has a military background, he served as the Pentagon's general counsel from 2009 to 2012, has me worried about how concerned he will be about the civilian population's privacy and civil liberties in a time of war, a never-ending war on terror. Finally, we have the guy who signs off on all this stuff. 8 years after 9/11, on December 8, 2009, following the Christmas Day underwear bombing attempt on an airliner bound from Detroit, Barack Obama pledged, and I quote, "As a nation, we will do everything in our power to protect our country." The question is, and I pose to all of you, do we really want them to do everything? Okay. 5 or so myths about airport security. I have trouble breaking these up into 5. Myth 1. The American public thinks the Transportation Security Administration is doing a good job. This is the persistent claim that I couldn't avoid looking into. So I Googled for the latest public opinion polls. Polls like these are generally done after a high-profile event or controversy. The latest one I could find about the TSA's performance was a Gallup poll done in July 2012. It followed a series of internet videos documenting the enhanced pat-downs of terrified children. Despite the videos and other perceived excesses, 54% of those surveyed said the TSA was doing a good or excellent job. 41% that TSA screening procedures were extremely effective or very effective at preventing acts of terrorism on U.S. airplanes. And 44% that the procedures were somewhat effective. That's 85% who expressed some degree of confidence in the TSA screening procedures, employing, it seems, post hoc, ergo propter hoc reasoning. No terrorist attacks, therefore the TSA is preventing them. How could the average citizen know whether TSA procedures are effective or not in preventing terrorist attacks? I doubt that a randomly chosen sample of Americans know about cases of the TSA foiling terrorist plots that the rest of us aren't privy to. That's what makes this a myth. I also found this. Shortly after the fatal shooting of TSA agent Gerardo Hernandez at LAX on November 1st, Reason Magazine did a poll asking whether TSA agents should be armed. 59% of those surveyed said yes. Now, the LAX shooting was a one-off event. The mentally unstable shooter was shot and critically wounded by airport police officers on the scene. He or anyone like him could have chosen any other target for his wrath. So I see no need for arming TSA officers based on one single event since the establishment of the TSA. It would be laying the groundwork for an airport shootout that could kill or injure many more people than could a lone nutcase. Myth 2. Terrorist methods are continuously evolving. This statement was the mantra of DHS Secretary Napolitano and remains the mantra of her TSA minion, John Pistoli. And it is one of my favorite exaggerations by Fear Incorporated. I cover many lame-brain terrorist plots in my book. For now, let's look at the ones involving passenger planes. Had a chance to read that?
Yep.
The big one, the only successful one, the one in which the entire counterterrorism industrial complex is predicated, was the planes operation of September 11th, 2001. Now, 2 plots involving carry-on explosives. I apologize, every time we give this talk, I apologize for the picture of Richard Reed, so I'll try to get past the slide as quickly as possible. On December 22nd, 2001, Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, on a flight from Paris to Miami, was attempting to detonate 50 grams of the explosive PETN with a match when passengers and flight crew intervened to save the day. On Christmas Day 2009, passengers and crew again intervened when Umar Farouk Al-Dumatala, on a flight from Amsterdam to Detroit, tried to detonate 80 grams of PETN concealed in his underwear, only to set himself on fire. Now, neither the amount of PETN carried by the shoe bomber or the underwear bomber would have been adequate to rupture the skin of a passenger plane. But as history shows, and terrorists know, even failed plots achieve their goal of inducing a stronger enemy into inflicting grief on itself. Terrorists rightly call this the death of 1,000 cuts. Now, our last aviation example, liquids on a plane. According to early news reports in August 2006, 24 men were arrested in London for plotting to mix the mythical binary liquid explosive on 7 airliners bound for North America. At the trial, however, it came to light that the would-be suicide bomber's actual plan was to smuggle the finished explosive onto the airplanes in plastic drink bottles. Also, they didn't have the tickets or passport necessary to board the airliners in the first place, and they had never actually succeeded in mixing from scratch the peroxide-based explosive they planned to use. So, the elevation of terrorist methods has gone from using knives to hijack airliners in 9/11, to inept attempts to detonate PETN, an explosive invented in the 19th century, to reports of suicide bombers planning to mix liquid explosives. Then in May 2012, there were reports that the CIA had acquired from an undercover agent a new improved body bomb, non-metallic and with a better detonation system that had been designed by Al-Qaeda master bomb maker Ibrahim Hassan al-Siri. There was, however, no report about the device being part of an actual plot in progress. And this seems to have been yet another amorphous terrorism threat pitched by Fear Incorporated. That story seems to have passed in the annals of terrorism folklore, since al-Siri, who was still at large despite our drone program, presumably could make another copy of that bomb. And there has been no such terrorist attempt in the 21 months since that report. Finally, speaking of body bombs, reports regularly resurface as the most diabolical of them all, the surgically implanted explosive. Oh, I skipped a slide, I'm sorry. The surgically implanted explosive. I'll leave the rest of this myth to your imaginations. Okay. So our test terrorist methods continuously evolving. Of them all, the most revolutionary Islamist plot on U.S. soil was the 9/11 planes operation. In a diabolical, audacious, I have to slow down, I'm missing slides here. In a diabolical, audacious, precisely coordinated attack, 19 men hijacked 4 airliners using knives. It was an attack so simple and so successful that one like it will never happen again. The rest of these have been attempted terrorism as usual, involving assorted, unsophisticated explosive devices and inept would-be terrorists. Myth 3. Screening technology is making us safer. I'm going to tell you right off the bat that the new screening technology isn't making us safer, it's just costing us more money. Take, for example,
listen to me. Please listen. If you don't, if you won't, if you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you!
thank you, it took me a week to put that together. Okay, the lobbying firm, the Chertoff Group, as Michael Chertoff, former head of the DHS, sold the TSA 250 Rapiscan, X-ray, backscatter, full-body scanners beginning in 2007. They produce an image like this, hence the nickname porno scanners. Rapiscan was unable to retrofit the machines with privacy software that would produce a less explicit image of the human body, as requested by the TSA, and the machines were warehoused or moved to other locations, such as prisons, by June 2013. What we are paying for now are millimeter wave machines. According to the TSA website, there are more than 740 millimeter wave full body scanners at 160 of the nation's 450 airports. The millimeter wave uses low-level electromagnetic waves rather than X-rays, and it is software that produces a generic outline of the human body as pictured here. But the millimeter wave is more sensitive to folds in clothing and moisture than is the X-ray. As a result, the false positive rate for millimeter wave machines is much higher than it is for X-ray backscatter machines, reportedly as high as 54%. At a congressional hearing in May 2012, Representative Peter DeFazio of Oregon said it routinely sets off an alarm when passing through the body scanner at the airport in Eugene. And he once watched 12 out of 15 people after him trigger the alarm and require a pat-down. Now let's return to the underwear bomber and his plasticized PETN. A report in the Journal of Transportation Security concluded that, and I quote, normal anatomy would make a dangerous amount of plastic explosive with tapered edges, like a pancake, difficult if not impossible to detect. This is true for both types of body scanners, it is true for metal detectors, and it is true for TSA agents patting us down. I have concluded that it is impossible to prevent any explosive, solid or liquid, from being smuggled aboard an aircraft by a terrorist or by a group of terrorists carrying small amounts each, without taking measures such as cavity searches that even a chronically frightened American public would accept. And it makes no sense to spend billions of dollars on screening machines and manpower when there hasn't been a competent terrorist attempt on an airliner since 9/11, and when machines don't work as advertised. Now consider this. The most unsecure part of TSA's protracted screening system is that it congregates potential victims. On January 24th, 2011, a suicide bomber set off an explosion at an unsecured section of Moscow's main airport, killing 29 people. Also, consider that on November 1st, 2013, at LAX, passengers in the security queue were sitting ducks as well, and some were injured by gunfire intended for TSA agents. The next time someone in the security line tells you that TSA screening procedures make them feel safer, tell them to look around and think about how many people a yet to be searched suicide bomber could kill in the middle of the line. Myth 4, layered security is keeping the flying public safe. This diagram is a visual representation of the TSA's revolutionary, common sense, and I quote, risk-based, layered approach to airport security. It's the flip side of DHS's old threat level system, only with more pretty colors. As Michael Chertoff explains it, you have to look at security as a series of layers. No one layer is flawless or foolproof. What Chertoff doesn't explain is that the more layers of security, the more stuff the TSA has to purchase. To avoid having to call this 25ness about airport security, I'm going to examine these layered security measures in stacks. Intelligence and identification. These layers are based on the dangerous delusion that it is possible to identify terrorists and prevent them from accomplishing their missions. Some examples. Richard Reed, the shoe bomber. Because of suspicions he raised among authorities, such as not having any luggage, Reed was prevented from boarding a flight from Paris to Miami on December 21st, 2001. However, after additional screening by the French National Police, he was allowed to board the plane the next day. Umar Farouk Abdul-Muttalib, the underwear bomber. November 2009, British intelligence officials and Umar's own father warned various U.S. officials, including 2 CIA officers in Nigeria, that Umar had been consulting with Islamic cleric and rabble-rouser Anwar al-Awlaki, and that he had murderous intentions. Abdul Muttalib's name never made it onto a no-fly list managed by the FBI. And on Christmas Day, he boarded Northwest Airlines 253 from Amsterdam to Detroit with PETN sewn into his BVDs. Deceased Boston Marathon bomber Tamerlan Tsarnaev. According to an April 19, 2013 press release by the FBI itself, in 2011, at the request of a foreign government, Tsarnaev was investigated. He and his family were even interviewed by the Bureau, and he was determined not to be a threat. All 19 hijackers, finally 9/11 again, all 19 hijackers were foreigners who had entered the United States on legal visas. All had real or fake photo IDs. In fact, among them they had 63 driver's licenses, real and phony, for identification. Now that I've reminded you of these lapses in intelligence, you should know about TSA Precheck. The program cross-checks information provided by 9 participating airlines and passengers against intelligence databases in order to assemble a list of trusted travelers who are eligible for screening. Are you laughing?
Sorry.
At some 100 airports. Program participants pass through metal detectors rather than full body scanners. They are not required to remove their shoes, take laptops out of their cases, or suffer other inconveniences in exchange for $85, being fingerprinted, and submitting sensitive personal information to a government contractor that administrates the program. Downsides of TSA Precheck are that personal information may be misused or stolen. Remember that the credit card information of some 40 million target customers was recently hacked. There is no guarantee of expedited screening anytime anyway, and Precheck creates 2 classes of airline passengers. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but I've read reports that non-participants are being waved from the peon lines to the Precheck lines, either because of a backlog in the former, or to give them a taste of a good life and entice them to fork over $85, to reduce the number of pat-downs resulting from false alarms by the millimeter wave body scanners, or to obfuscate the fact that the scanners are junk. In its zeal to sign up as many Precheck members as possible, the TSA announced in December that members of the military may join simply by giving the TSA their Department of Defense identification numbers. Now please recall that on November 5, 2009, American-born Muslim Nidal Malik, do I get paid extra for learning how to pronounce these names?
I'm impressed.
Nidal Malik Hassan, a major in the U.S. Army, went berserk and fatally shot 13 people and injured 30 others at Fort Hood, Texas. Add to Precheck relaxed screening for younger children, the elderly and infirm, the fact that the TSA publishes a list of airports with body scanners on its website, and you have, Airport Security, America's Counterterrorism Maginot Line. Like France's post-World War I Maginot Line, designed to repel another invasion from the Germans, today's terrorists can just go around it. Customs and Border Protection and Viper. I'm guessing the Customs and Border Protection on this list refers to the agency's global entry and other ID programs, which are sisters to Precheck. Also, after flying into Boston Logan from overseas, I watched Border Patrol agents debriefing and fingerprinting passengers in the U.S. citizens' passport line. Welcome home to America.
What's Viper? Oh, sorry.
They told me I'd have hecklers. Viper stands for Visible Intermodal Protection, Prevention, and Response. The TSA has authority over all forms of transportation in the United States and much more, it seems. Viper teams show up at highway way stations and train terminals and sporting events such as the Super Bowl, music festivals, and rodeos. In 2012, Viper teams ran more than 8,800 unannounced checkpoints and search operations with local law enforcement officers outside of airports, including at the Indianapolis 500 and at the Democratic and Republican National Conventions. Viper has an annual budget of $100 million. Behavior detection officers. Now the TSA SPOT program, screening of passengers by observation techniques. SPOT employs more than 2,800 behavior detection officers at more than 160 airports. It has cost taxpayers nearly $900 million since its inception in 2007. And, you guessed it, it has failed to snag one single terrorist. According to a November 2013 report by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, and I quote, available evidence does not support whether behavioral indicators can be used to identify persons who may pose a threat to aviation security. Still quoting. GAO reviewed four meta-analyses that included over 400 studies from the past 60 years and found that the human ability to accurately identify deceptive behavior based on behavioral indicators, and skeptics in the audience will recognize this phrase, is the same as or slightly better than chance. And the GAO reported in May 2010 that at least 17 known terrorists traveled through at least 23 U.S. airports in the SPOT program. Do you want to get without being detected? Okay. LAX shooting victim Gerardo Hernandez was one of 100 TSA behavior detection officers at LAX. Can you spot the terrorists? Hint on this one, bottom right. And the hint on this one, anybody? People with the gloves.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, finally, after all this piling on, we get down to the bottom layers of the security pile. Genuine common sense measures that can be effective, that do not involve buying more and more expensive equipment that might or might not work, that are not costing taxpayers billions of dollars, and that have been used for decades. On September 12, 2001, no cabin of airline passengers was going to allow their airplane to be hijacked, period. Add reinforced cockpit doors, trained flight crew, maneuvers and other measures that pilots can take to spoil the party, and armed personnel such as air marshals. And, as witnessed by the failed shoe bomber and underwear bomber attempts, passengers and flight crews are batting 1,000 in taking care of themselves. Myth 5. The TSA takes care to ensure your personal security. Actually, it's pretty much the opposite. Emptying your personal effects onto the belt makes them subject to loss or theft by TSA agents or other passengers. Money belts, for example, whose specific purpose is to keep valuable items concealed and secure, have to be removed, once again exposing their contents to loss or theft. Screening procedures, such as lining up to pass through body scanners, pat-downs, and enhanced pat-downs, prolong this exposure of your unattended personal items. Innocuous personal property, such as bottled water and fingernail clippers, is capriciously confiscated. As we saw earlier, TSA security lines create targets standing around. Personal information submitted or collected for TSA Precheck and other trusted travelers programs is subject to misuse or hacking. And if being groped by a stranger isn't compromising your personal security, I don't know what is. Bonus myth. The mission of the TSA is to prevent terrorism on America's transportation system. Not anymore. Following 9/11, it made sense to reappraise an airport security system that had changed little since the 1980s, and to upgrade airport security until the terrorist threat had been realistically assessed. However, and this is the point of my book, forget about risk analysis. Business is business. In 12 years since 9/11, purposeful fear-mongering by politicians, government contractors, lobbyists, security mavens, and others who profit from keeping us frightened has created a permanent platform for an open-ended war on terror and the voracious counterterrorism/surveillance industrial complex they say it requires. TSA's mission has shifted from initial efforts to keep the flying public safe to making us feel safe, security theater, to performing security rituals for their own sake, searching people for the sake of searching people, and finding new methods, equipment, and reasons for doing so. As proof of this, consider SPOT, a $900 million program that seems to be designed after TV fantasies about FBI profilers. Billions of dollars worth of body scanners and other equipment that doesn't work and probably couldn't work. Viper, a $100 million a year serpent that involves searching people and vehicles in shotgun fashion across America, and that has slid into venues that have nothing at all to do with transportation. From personal experience, full-blown TSA searches of passengers leaving airports. I still haven't figured that one out. Enhanced pat-downs of people with metallic artificial body parts, when a simple wanding would be sufficient to locate and identify the suspect object. The fact that the next layer of airport security is whatever pops into John Pistoli's head or serves the interest of government contractors, lobbyists, or politicians. And now, and most annoying to me as an American, in the face of the very airport security quagmire it created, the TSA takes credit for, and Americans laud, a la the Stockholm Syndrome, innovations that mitigate it, such as pre-check or being allowed to keep your shoes on. In America's meticulously nurtured climate of fear, each new security measure both makes us feel safer and makes us think there's a new danger out there from which we need to be protected. Of course, this is just my opinion. In fairness, let's get the final word to the Department of Homeland Security.
Beware, beware, beware of the big green dragon that sits on your doorstep. He eats little boys, puppy ducktails, and big fat snails. Beware, take care, beware.
That's it.
Okay, so we're going to take some questions, and I want to thank you for coming to our first Skeptic Skeptic and Humanist group meeting. For those who didn't, who arrived a little late, I wanted to make sure I told you that we're going to meet up at Gianni's Pizza on Lighthouse Avenue after this if you want to continue the discussion. I have no idea how crowded they are. It's not usually that bad, but we'll just get tables as close together as each other as we possibly can if you guys are interested. But let's have some questions for Richard.
Yes.
So I know you pointed out the issues that you have, but do you have any solutions opposed, like on the opposite end of it?
That's the one question I hate. I get that all the time.
It's a good question, though. I mean,
Yeah,
I just want to know if you have
See,
solutions.
the last answer I gave was campaign finance reform. If you follow my logic here, this whole system is driven by lobbyists. It costs so much to run for office today that we're really living in plutocracy. Okay, so you know, if we could some way avoid that aspect of it, then we could take a realistic risk analysis. The risk analysis being done by now, or if I'm a politician and I back off on the security and there's a terrorist attack, I don't get reelected, and so forth. Okay, is that a stupid enough answer for you?
Well, do you think it's okay
That wasn't
to
an
just
insult,
let people?
vague enough.
Do you think it's okay to just let anybody walk on a plane without any screening? That's my question.
Well, I don't
what
know.
sort of measures would you, if you were, you know, say you were John Pistoli or whatever, what sort of measures would you, what would you do to, you know?
Well, despite our intelligence failures, that's probably the best single thing we can do. So I think we should back off to the security measures, whether it's just metal detectors, shoot your luggage chute on the belt, and buzz everybody through. Okay. You also have to look at the fact, let's assume that security measures are working and they're preventing people from, terrorists from getting on airplanes. Why don't they do a Boston Marathon bomb? How easy was that? They could take a bomb like that, put it on the bleachers of a Little League game, and shut the whole country down, right? The fact is, it's not their agenda.
But the Boston Marathon wasn't the airport. So there's
No,
a difference.
I'm saying no. No, if airport security is keeping these people off airplanes, their alternative would be to pick soft targets. And they're not doing that, with one exception. And this guy was a freelancer, that's another thing. So was the Times Square bomber was a freelancer, so forth. Yes?
Yeah, my question kind of addresses her question, and perhaps you can inform me on something. Because the best airport security in the world, as I know, doesn't have anything like the TSA, and that's what the Israelis do.
Exactly, yes.
And it focuses on psychological profiles.
Right.
They just, people coming through, I know they ask, you got to go through 5, 6, 7 people who ask you questions, and they look in the first and they sort things out. But every time I've heard this being suggested as a way to deal with airport security in this country, it always comes up like it won't work here. But I never heard the example explain why it is, why we can't do
Profiling. Israelis feel free profile, and we don't. It's a conundrum. You're gonna strip search a little old 95-year-old lady and let the guy with Allah's great tattooed on his forehead through the line, right? Because you don't want to be profiled. That's the best answer I can give to that.
Well, the profiling would be, I can see where that would be a problem, that would be part of it, but they're doing a lot more than profiling too. I mean, it's they're doing good psychological analysis there.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay, you think it's more just profiling they're doing?
Yes.
Well, what Glenn just said, from what I understand, is the reason why it wouldn't work in America is because we're huge compared to Israel. And it's just kind of overwhelming to be able to do it. But what I was going to ask you, Richard, is I fly a lot. I'm probably on a plane 3 times a month, something like that, maybe more. I've noticed they've started doing something a little more expedited the last 3 or 4 times I've flown. In fact, you go through and the TSA agent will put a little star on a little pink star on your thing, and you just go through, and you don't have to take off your jacket, your shoes, you might have to take your laptop out. I'm wondering if this is a reaction to people just complaining about things, or if it's just so crowded and they need to get them through. But I've been actually, maybe out of 5 times flying, I've been picked twice, and I thought that was really odd that I was getting through so quick. But even if they're speeding me up, I still have to be in. There's a bunch of people in front of me that are not being sped up. So it's just annoying. You know, security is just, it just seems so ridiculous. I've got it down, you know, shoes off, this, that, everything comes out, here comes my liquids, and they're all in there. And it's just, you know, every time I do it, I think this is just so stupid. It's like whatever the TSA or the flight people say, you need to turn off your phones because it's going to, you know, do something to the landing and interfere. And it's like, you know what, you're lying. That's ridiculous. And if you're lying about that, what else are you lying about? It's so stupid.
Actually, they did test that cell phone thing.
Yeah, and you know what, I haven't turned off my phone in years.
Okay.
But I would be very, I think that the worst security would be that if they allow people to start talking on the phones on the plane, or allowing even the beeps, because that is annoying, and I can see a lot of road rage. Plane rage?
They have a different.
I would be really upset if somebody sitting next to me is you're playing some video game and beeping at me. You know, that would drive me nuts. But
Well,
I
back
guess
to
there
your
could be a problem.
your STAR question, I think they're giving you honorary pre-check membership.
Honorary, because they want my
There's-
$85, they fly so much, huh?
Well, no, it's, they have a quota they're trying to fill, signing up pre-check members, and they're not meeting it, so they're just grabbing it.
Oh, you think that's what it is?
Yeah.
Huh, well, I was wondering, I could just draw a little star on my thing and make it a little different. I just figure out what color pin they're using today.
Is $85 every flight you take?
No, it's, I think it's an annual membership. Yes.
Why is our system so darn reactive? I mean, we didn't have to take our shoes off and, until some, idiot had bomb materials in his shoe.
Right.
And they didn't start enforcing all those liquid rules until, somebody tried to mix something on a plane.
Actually, I cover that in my book. It's not possible to mix a liquid explosive on an airplane, the way it doesn't.
Yeah, but we've had to take our shoes off for, 12 years
Right.
because of one incident.
They don't make us fly around.
Yeah, why not?
I'm sorry, so what was your question again?
Why is it so reactive?
Well, see, we react to certain threats, but then we're proactive when somebody makes up a threat, like the surgically implanted explosives, or, well, not that so much, but now there's a thing going around about shoe bombs for outbound flights, okay? So people are now, I guess pre-check passengers even now are being required to take their shoes off or have their shoes inspected. But people profit from keeping this right. You have to keep that in the back of your head. Yes.
I currently work as a flight crew on international run, Paris,
Mhm.
the Paris runs, and you do have the weight of the responsibility for 300-400 people, and especially around holidays. I worked with Pan Am, and of course, Lockerbie was
Mhm.
still very memorable. They do have sky marshals on board, and the threats do escalate around the holidays. Witness again the Pan Am Lockerbie incident. Maybe the sky marshals aren't always necessary, but there is a certain comfort.
Well, that's the first line of defense. We distinguish between suicide bombers in an airplane and hijack attempts.
That's true.
Okay, so.
Also, breaching of the cockpit.
Right, well, that would be a hijacking attempt, yeah. So that's where your air marshals come in, your reinforced
And your
cockpit
crew.
doors. And you probably know things about what the pilots can do that we don't know, right?
Exactly.
Like cutting off the oxygen or going into a dive. or-
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Furthermore, wasn't this Richard Reed, was there some incident about the shoe bomber that he had, the shoes had been moistened or?
Yeah, it was rainy the day
It
before
had
the
been
plane.
raining, so they did not function as.
But I also cover this in my book, the PETN he had on wouldn't have been enough to maybe just kill the passenger next to him. It wouldn't have ruptured the body of the airplane. Neither would the underwear bombers not PETN.
There's a lot to consider.
Because experience will run. Okay. Yes.
I also kind of have a question as priorities. Like there are people with like Black Friday. People wait 5 hours all night in the cold to get a TV.
Right.
Yet you can't wait 5 minutes to maybe have a little bit more security. And not that I'm full-blown full security or nothing, but I feel like maybe there should be something in between, or at least, even. There needs to be something. I would rather wait 5 minutes or a little bit longer to know that I have at least some level of security versus nothing.
See, now we get into philosophical issues, how do you
Maybe
feel
it's
about
a priority for me. I don't need a TV. Wait, all
Well,
night on the
how
cold
much
for
you care about
TV,
your privacy or your Fourth Amendment rights? Yes.
One of the points on your later part of the talk was about TSA agents molesting people. To your knowledge, has that ever actually happened?
Oh, there are several documented cases in my book. They'll pick pretty women for pat downs, and also my wife has an artificial knee, so we went through security in Kalispell, Montana. The metal detector went off, and they gave her a full pat down. Now, why would they? She told them, I have an artificial knee. Take your metal detector and wind my knee. No, that wasn't enough. The procedure is, for the sake of having a procedure, someone trips the metal detector, you give them a full pat down. And in fact, I corresponded with TSA about that, and they could not explain that policy.
Well, I think possibly one reason could be that people who were bent on doing something could, you know, have an artificial need and use it as a decoy for something else.
So where do you stop?
Well, I know, I'm just saying that might be their thought process.
Then we get into proactive, reactive question again. Where do you stop? You can, you know, you have to be, certainly have to be reactive at some point. But then you can be proactive on all these fictional and imagined threats, and there's no endpoint, right? Yes, who was next? Okay.
I just thought you'd like to hear a story of a women's rights organization that's trying to use it to protect young women that are being forced to go for a forced marriage. They tell the girls to hide something metal in their underpants, so they will be taken aside and they can say, I'm being taken against my will, please take me to protect it. As just one of those ironies and oddities of human complexity and tragedy of life with so much suffering and injustice. But it was just one of those things that when I read it, I'm sure very few, since it's their families that are doing that, girls would actually do that. But it was just an idea that had to come up.
Sure. What? With the IP?
Oh, it was somebody else.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just want to one little thing. I think that the scariest thing that I see from all this isn't just so much the TSA, but what you kind of touched on with this Viper, because I can just see how this can be eventually expanded and far. Get on an airplane, you got to wait, and you know, and getting on an airplane is for a lot of people is just something you do once a year or occasionally. But I can see where this is going to be done from just having these Viper inspections, not just a big sporting event, a Super Bowl or a baseball game. It can be done just eventually just going through them all. Right. Because as you pointed out, and all these places are very vulnerable. And the trend that we're heading to with all these things coming up is going to look very ominous 10 or maybe 20 or 30 years from now. Not so much we're going to experience so much, but for what our children are going to experience. And that is this creeping security it's going to happen. I just don't see how it's going to be stopped.
See, that brings up an interesting question. Generational shifts in the definition of personal privacy. I mean, you know, people go through life like this. They're on all the social networks and everything. They tell other people what they have for lunch, where they had lunch and all this kind of stuff. So their conception of privacy is probably different from yours or from mine, right? So
it just is very ominous for the future.
yeah, actually, yeah. Well, actually, they're placing a certain amount of emphasis on rail security. So they search passengers getting on trains, and there's thousands of miles of tracks where all a terrorist has to do is place a bomb and blow it up when the train comes. I mean, let's get real here, okay? That's what I meant by searching for the sake of searching people, right? Anybody else?
Well, I don't understand why we became less of a threat when we became 75.
Exactly.
You know, like if somebody wanted to do something, you
Yeah, like
just get
some
your
guy-
grandma or somebody to do it.
Oh, I know the answer to that.
Some guy named Mohammed finds out
They
the
were people were breaking hips. I do know the answer to that. I'm a nurse. People were falling and breaking hips trying to get their shoes on or off.
Okay.
And that's why they did that.
Really?
Yeah.
So you're terminally ill, and some guy named Mohammed comes up to you and says, you want to leave $1 million to your family? Put this in, you know, stick this under your seat of your wheelchair, right?
But you'd think the hip replacement lobby would want to keep
Yeah,
that.
I'm sure there's a push-pull there.
In all of these things, it's follow the money.
Right,
Everything.
exactly.
I mean, this is not the only big lobby in Washington.
Right.
The pharmaceutical industry after industry follows this pattern.
Right.
To make you afraid, to make you alarmed and anxious, to say, oh, we can cure that for you, and here's how we'll do it, and then to lobby the spending of money to do it.
Yeah, they write
This is from time immemorial. This has been the pattern.
these lobbying groups actually write the legislation on these.
Of course, they always do, always have. I spent 35 years in Washington.
Oh,
and
okay.
watched it every day. And
You're
it doesn't
filthy.
change.